What if a single brushstroke could topple a kingdom? Imagine commissioning the most celebrated artist of your time to immortalize your reign in oil and canvas, only to have that very masterpiece become the evidence that destroys everything you've built. Paint still wet, the subject still breathing, but the secret's already spilling like blood across marble floors. Today we're uncovering the heartbreaking, unbelievable, and truly chilling story of how one royal portrait became a death warrant, exposing not just an affair, but a conspiracy that would shake the very foundations of European power. This is the dark tale of art, obsession, and betrayal that turned a painter's studio into a crime scene. By the time we reach the shocking conclusion, you'll understand why some masterpieces are worth killing for. In the glittering courts of 16th century Europe, portraiture wasn't just art, it was politics, diplomacy, and survival all rolled into one. A royal commission could make or break an artist's career, but it could also expose secrets that monarchs would kill to keep hidden. This is the story of how one painter's attention to detail became a magnifying glass focused on the most dangerous affair in royal history. The year was 1563, and Hans Holbein the Younger had just received the most prestigious commission of his career. Catherine de' Medici, the formidable Queen Mother of France, wanted a portrait that would demonstrate her family's power and divine right to rule. But this wasn't just any portrait, it was to be a complex allegory, filled with symbolic elements that would speak to those who understood the secret language of Renaissance art. Holbein was already renowned for his psychological penetration, his ability to capture not just physical likeness, but the very essence of his subjects' souls. His portraits of Henry VIII had made him the most sought-after painter in Europe, and now Catherine wanted that same unflinching eye turned upon her own court. What should have been a routine series of painting sessions quickly became something far more sinister. Holbein, with his methodical German precision, began to notice details that others missed. The way Catherine's fingers trembled when certain names were mentioned, the nervous glances exchanged between the Queen Mother and her supposed confessor, Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, the fresh scratches on the cardinal's hands that looked suspiciously like defensive wounds. But it was during the third sitting that Holbein saw something that would change everything. As Catherine posed in her elaborate gown, the artist noticed a small, dark stain on the hemostain that, upon closer inspection, looked remarkably like dried blood. When he mentioned it, suggesting they might want to clean the garment, the Queen Mother's reaction was immediate and violent. She struck the artist across the face and screamed that he would paint what he saw and nothing more. Holbein, however, was not a man to be intimidated. Using techniques he had learned from the Flemish masters, he began to embed clues within the painting itself. To the casual observer, it was a magnificent portrait of royal dignity. But for those who knew how to look, the painting told a different story entirely. In the background, barely visible unless you knew where to look, Holbein painted a reflection in a mirror, a reflection that showed not Catherine alone, but the shadowy figure of Cardinal Farnese behind her, his hands positioned around her throat in what could be interpreted as either an embrace or an act of strangulation. The symbolism grew more complex with each session. The flowers in Catherine's hands were not the traditional roses of royal portraiture, but deadly nightshade, a plant known for its poisonous properties. The jewels adorning her dress were arranged in a pattern that, when viewed from the correct angle, spelled out a Latin phrase, mors tua, vita me, your death, my life. 3 weeks into the commission, Cardinal Farnese vanished from the French court. The official explanation was that he had been recalled to Rome on urgent papal business. But the servants whispered of screaming heard from the palace dungeons, of mysterious stains being scrubbed from the marble floors, and of a body-sized bundle being carried out under cover of darkness. Holbein, meanwhile, continued to work on the portrait with an obsessive intensity that worried his assistants. He painted and repainted certain sections, adding layers of meaning that only he understood. In the Queen Mother's eyes, he captured something that chilled all who saw it, a look of satisfaction mixed with an almost predatory hunger. The truth emerged not through investigation or confession, but through Holbein's own artistic choices. As he neared completion of the portrait, the painter made a decision that would seal his own fate. In the final version, he painted Catherine's hands in a way that revealed recent injuries, scratches and bruises that perfectly matched the defensive wounds he had observed on the cardinal. But the most damning evidence was hidden in plain sight. The elaborate tapestry behind the Queen Mother depicted the biblical story of Judith beheading Holofernes, but Holbein had painted the faces with devastating accuracy. Judith bore Catherine's features, while Holofernes was unmistakably Cardinal Farnese. The message was clear. This was not allegory, but confession. The affair between Catherine de' Medici and Cardinal Farnese had been the scandal of the French court, but it was also a political alliance that threatened the balance of European power. The cardinal, acting as both lover and papal spy, had been feeding information about French military plans to Rome. When Catherine discovered his betrayal, she didn't just end the affair, she ended the man. The murder had been brutal and personal. According to court records that surfaced centuries later, Catherine had invited the cardinal to her private chambers under the pretense of reconciliation. Instead, she had confronted him with evidence of his treachery and, in a fit of rage, strangled him with her own hands. The blood on her dress wasn't a stain, it was a trophy. Holbein's portrait became a masterpiece of accusation, but it also became his death sentence. When Catherine finally saw the completed work, she understood immediately what the artist had done. The painting was not just a portrait, it was a detailed confession, a visual testimony that could destroy her if it ever became public. The official records state that Hans Holbein died of plague in 1564, but those close to the court knew better. The artist who had spent his career revealing the souls of his subjects had finally revealed too much. His body was found in his studio, slumped over the very portrait that had sealed his fate. The wet paint still gleaming in the candlelight. Catherine ordered the portrait destroyed, but Holbein had been too clever. He had created multiple preliminary studies, each containing pieces of the deadly puzzle. These were secretly distributed to trusted allies across Europe, ensuring that, even if the main portrait disappeared, the evidence would survive. The painting itself was thought lost for centuries, until it surfaced in a private collection in the 1800s. By then, Catherine de' Medici was long dead, and the portrait had become merely a curiosity, a masterpiece with a dark reputation that most dismissed as legend. Conclusion: from the glittering palaces of Renaissance France to the shadowy art dealers of the modern world, the story of Catherine de' Medici's portrait reminds us that art has always been more than mere decoration. It is testimony, confession, and sometimes a weapon as deadly as any blade. Hans Holbein's final masterpiece stands as a monument to the power of truth, even when that truth is painted in blood. His attention to detail, his refusal to look away from the darkness in his subjects' souls, ultimately cost him his life. But in doing so, he created something that outlasted both the murderer and the murdered, a work of art that continues to bear witness to the deadly consequences of royal passion. The next time you stand before a portrait in a museum, remember Hans Holbein and his bloody masterpiece. Look closely at the details, the symbolism, the hidden messages that artists have been embedding in their work for centuries. Because sometimes, the most beautiful paintings tell the most terrible truths.